Everyone remembers the final lap. Max Verstappen, fresh tires, one shot at Lewis Hamilton, the championship on the line.
Max Verstappen, you are the world champion! The world champion!
What almost nobody talks about is that the entire sequence should never have worked in the first place. This isn't another retelling of a safety car controversy you've already seen 100 times. With the same 3 radio clips and the same slow-motion replay of the overtake dropped in for the 100th time, without any new context attached to it. This is what actually made that final lap possible. The parts that rarely make it into the highlight reel. And it starts with a gamble that could have ended the title fight 3 laps earlier, in the exact opposite direction from how everyone remembers it. Going into the final laps, Hamilton was cruising. He'd led 51 of 58 laps, comfortably out front, tires holding up, on course for what would have been a record-breaking 8th World Championship. There was no obvious drama left in the race at that point, just a long, controlled drive to the finish. Then, on lap 53, Nicholas Latifi crashed his Williams into the barrier at high speed, and the safety car came out. In an instant, the entire calculation of the race changed. Hamilton was still leading on the road, but now Red Bull had a decision to make within seconds, and it was a genuinely dangerous one, with the whole championship riding on it. Red Bull immediately pitted Verstappen for fresh, soft tires. On paper, with the ending we all know, that sounds like an obvious call in hindsight. It wasn't at the moment they actually made it. If the race had simply finished under the safety car, which was a genuine, live possibility at that exact point in the race, Verstappen's pit stop would have dropped him behind cars he'd already passed earlier in the afternoon, and Hamilton would have won the championship comfortably, on old tires, with no late drama required at all. Red Bull effectively bet the entire championship on the race resuming with actual green flag racing before the laps ran out. If that bet hadn't paid off, this wouldn't be remembered as one of the greatest comebacks in the sport's history. It would be remembered as one of the worst strategic errors anyone has ever made in a title decider. Here's the part that barely gets mentioned in most retellings of this race. None of what followed would have mattered at all if Mercedes could have simply pitted Hamilton for a fresh set of tires of his own during that same safety car period, matching Verstappen's move and neutralizing the entire gamble instantly. They couldn't do that, and the specific reason is Sergio Perez. Earlier in the race, Red Bull deliberately left Perez out on badly worn tires to slow Hamilton down, and when Hamilton caught up to him after his own pit stop, Perez held him up for an entire lap and a half, costing him nearly 8 seconds of pure race time. Verstappen called him a legend over the radio in real time while it was still happening. That single defensive drive, largely forgotten now compared to the final lap itself, is the actual mechanical reason Mercedes couldn't risk pitting Hamilton again without simply handing the race lead to Verstappen outright. Perez didn't win anything that day, finished the race with nothing to show for it on the results sheet, and barely features in how this race gets remembered by casual fans. He's the reason everything that followed was even possible in the first place. Okay, before we go any further, make sure you're smashing that hype button because this is where the actual controversy starts. With the safety car out, 5 lapped cars sat physically between Hamilton and Verstappen on the circuit, meaning Verstappen couldn't get a clean run at the leader even once green flag racing actually resumed, championship or not. Race director Michael Masi initially announced over the radio that lapped cars would not be allowed to overtake the safety car, which was the standard procedure at that stage of a race. Then, with barely 2 laps left in the entire season and every team principal listening in real time, he reversed the call, allowing only those 5 specific lapped cars to unlap themselves, clearing a direct, uninterrupted path for Verstappen to race Hamilton one-on-one for the title. The radio traffic from that moment is still some of the most replayed audio in the sport's history. Christian Horner, pushing hard. "Just do your job, Michael." Toto Wolff, on the other line, "Michael, that is not right." Masi's response has become almost as famous as the overtake itself. "It's called a motor race, okay? we went car racing. Months later, the FIA published its own official review of exactly what happened. And it's genuinely worth reading closely because it contains an admission most casual retellings of this story skip entirely. The report confirmed the safety car was brought back into the pits without completing the additional lap technically required under the sporting regulations in place at the time, a straightforward procedural breach. It also confirmed that only 5 of the lapped cars were released specifically because the process of identifying which cars were lapped was, at that point in F1's history, still done manually by a person watching timing screens, and human error meant not every eligible car actually got the same treatment that day. The FIA's own fix afterward wasn't a public statement, a resignation, or an apology aimed at either team. It was building dedicated software specifically designed to automate that exact process, so no future race director would ever again have to make that call by hand, under pressure, with a championship on the line. That's not spin from either team's press office. That's the governing body's own official conclusion, published in writing months after the fact. So what actually decided the 2021 championship? Not one single moment, the way it usually gets told. A chain of them, stacked on top of each other, any one of which could have broken the other way entirely. A high-risk tire gamble that could very easily have failed and ended the story 3 laps early. A defensive drive from a teammate that quietly made the entire endgame even possible in the first place. A manual, human-run process with no safeguard built in against exactly the kind of error that happened. And one final lap call, made under enormous pressure in real time, that's still being debated years later. Masi never worked as F1 race director again after that season. The rule itself was rewritten within months of the controversy. And the 2 men at the actual center of it, Hamilton and Verstappen, still get asked about that single lap in almost every major interview since, 4 years on. Whatever you personally believe about who deserved the title that day, and people are still genuinely split on it years later, the full, honest chain of events is a lot more complicated than the simple version that just says, Masi decided it. And that complexity is exactly what tends to get lost every time this race gets retold. We'll keep digging into the moments everyone else skips past. Smash that hype button, subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one.